What you're about to experience is one man's quest to see beyond the tumultuous period we're in and to envision what lies just beyond our grasp, yet well within our reach. Welcome to Larry Rifkin's America Trends, where the future has arrived, and it's just in time.
We've all heard the stories of the muscle-bound man who can't apply his strength in any practical way. In some sense, it almost feels as if that defines the U.S. military. In these times of asymmetric warfare and non-state actors, recent conflicts we've been involved in have come to an unresolved end, where we are more likely to set deadlines for our involvement than celebrate victories in any conventional sense. How should we use a large force like ours when many of the conflicts are intrastate or with terrorist elements? To help us understand the future role of the military around the world, we're joined today on America Trends by Colonel David Hunt, whom you may have seen as an analyst on television for many years. He's been fighting our nation's wars for more than 30 years. He has extensive experience in special operations as the counterterrorism coordinator for the Seoul Olympics and as a tactical advisor in Bosnia. He has a new book out called Without Mercy. He co-wrote the book with R.J. Pinheiro. While it's a fictionalized account, he believes that the premise of the book is plausible and, frankly, frightening. In it, Manhattan is hit by a nuclear bomb. Hundreds of thousands perish, and the destruction is biblical in nature. The American economy is in chaos. Riots and looting spark across the country, and our enemies prepare to press the attack. So, Colonel Hunt, do you truly envision that a non-state actor, in cooperation with a state, in this case Pakistan, could plan and successfully execute such an attack as is documented in your book, Without Mercy?
Very short, correct answer, yes. It's only a question of money and capability. It's not a question of will. You know, do they have the will to do it? It takes money, staggering amount of logistics and planning, which we try to talk about in Without Mercy, which you can get, by the way, at withoutmercy.org. It's a very realistic scenario. It's scary. That was the point of it, to get people's attention. It's, I think, the best book out of its kind. It's kind of an apocalyptic thriller with terrorism at the center. Pakistan is already a very disingenuous, deceptive country, which we have needed in the last 16 years in the war in Afghanistan for logistics and in the war in Iraq for logistics support. You know, we have bases there. But they have also they've also worked with the Taliban and ISIS and Al-Qaeda against us. So for me and R.J. Pinheiro, who's the co-author, it seemed a very easy fit to make, and we designed this thing to be as real as possible. They get 3 nukes from Pakistan, and they blow the smallest one up outside of Bagram Air Base to get the world's attention when they next send YouTube video out to the world for the demands. But before they even blew up Bagram, they had sent 2 more nukes in tankers heading west. Very believable, very doable. It's a very competent terrorist force we designed because they've had ISIS and the rest of them that had 16 years of fighting us, and they've become very competent, very deadly.
Well, is the deterrence that we have in place today, in your mind, to detect and blunt such an attack the right one?
No, it's not enough. No. It's unfortunately, very realistic. It's going to take the fight on terrorism. Is so far for 16 years in Afghanistan, 13 in Iraq, has been mainly about killing terrorists. And we're very good at it. We've killed them by the thousands. But there are the underpinnings, core issues of terrorism we have not got at, and it's been predominantly a U.S. fight. The U.S. is the ones that are losing the majority of their forces, the most wounded, the vast amount of the money has been spent, and it's really a world effort. You simply can't put a net up around the country to inspect all tankers that come into the ports. And these nation states like Pakistan or North Korea or Russia, just to name three, the way they protect their stockpiles is not first rate, and they're very money will take care of almost anything. So it's a matter of money.
Well, what about Iran? You didn't mention Iran.
Well, yes, clearly Iran's one of them. Yeah, of course.
No, as you do look upon it, in terms of the United States, we're having a hard time calibrating what our role should be in terms of boots on the ground as opposed to tactical support, special operations. Where's that balance going forward as you see it?
I think it's we're losing the war on terror. We've been 16 years. We've been fighting in Afghanistan. It's the longest continuous war in the nation's history. We've been at 13 years in Iraq. And by the way, this past Tuesday, we invaded Syria. We put 300 Rangers on the ground in armored vehicles and about 200 Marines, artillery, and backed up by up to 5,000 forces. And we're moving forces into Kuwait. We have to pay attention to this. We've invaded a country. We're going to kill ISIS in the meantime. I get it. But then you have another failed state in Syria, failed state in Iraq. So my point is, Ben, and that's why we make this book so dramatic, Without Mercy, is just killing them is not then the answer. And so the protection of the country, the U.S., has got to be getting at the core issues of terrorism, because we are an open society with open borders. That is, in our book Without Mercy, is used against us. It's a vast country with vast borders, and we've got a very, very dedicated and very deadly enemy. And we've got nation states, North Korea developing a nuke, Iran developing a nuke, all the other countries that have them, Pakistan, India, Russia, Israel. A lot of countries have the nuke. Great Britain, France, Japan. I mean, you can go on and on. So it makes perfect sense to us, which is why we wrote Without Mercy, to show the worst case scenario possible, to try to get at the readers and the readers' attention on what happens. It's not just the nuke, which is bad enough, but if we have a brand new president who's a combat veteran, who happens to be a woman, and she has to cut through a nation's bureaucracy, which is staggeringly oppressive to get things done. In order she has to create a separate force working for her to chase this nuke down, which goes from Pakistan to the U.S. into Mexico, where it's picked up by drug cartels along with ISIS to get that thing back in the U.S. And she has to help rebuild Lower Manhattan. And we've declared martial law, which means you've got and shut down all the road networks and railroads, which means you have about 3 days before the nation runs out of food and gas. I mean, 3 days is all it takes to shut that down.
Well, Colonel, it does sound rather dystopian, and we hope that it never happens. But I've got to tell you that probably as long ago as a dozen years, right after 9/11, I spoke to Paul L. Williams, who wrote a number of books suggesting that this was a likely scenario in terms of a nuclear attack, a dirty bomb, or worse. And why hasn't it happened yet, given the open borders debate that we're having and all of the flow across our borders? Why? Is it resources?
It takes a nation state like Pakistan with their very capable intelligence service. I mean, they're duplicitous, but they're very capable. The Pakistanis. To work with a terrorist organization like ISIS, which is brutally efficient. I mean, they ran out of Syria into Iraq, and the 50,000 man Iraqi army that we trained ran off the battlefield, and now we're taking it all back. So it would take those two, a combination like that, a capable intelligence service and government, and a deadly terrorism organization like ISIS to pull it off. And so far, that combination has not happened. And I pray it never does. But our point is, we don't want to see this scenario, and we have to change our tactics, which has only been killing. I'm not opposed to killing terrorists at all, but it's not been working. So you have to continue to kill terrorists and attack this failed state issue. There's 65 million refugees in the world. about 25 million of them are kids. And that can't stand. If it does, then we'll kill Al-Qaeda in Syria, and we'll find Al-Qaeda 2 in, or ISIS 2 or 3 in Libya or Yemen, which is where Al-Qaeda or the Arabian Peninsula is. What's that Ray, the SEAL Ray just went after. These things have to get addressed, and I think it's a world effort, not just U.S.
As you listen to the debate that's raging in America today about refugees, what do you think America's posture should be in relation to this?
I promise you this, that the countries that, I think it was a political gesture. It does not have an effect on terrorism. People are afraid. Certainly get that. But simply stopping people from so many countries coming in here will not affect this war on terror. I mean, again, we're killing them by the thousands. We're extremely efficient. The last president bombed or invaded 7 countries in 8 years. I mean, that was, half the country hated him. But for that's a lot. That's a lot of countries. And it hasn't solved. It hasn't stopped. We're not going to have a victory. We're not going to have white flags. We're fighting an amorphous thing called terrorism, and it doesn't matter what you call it. That's another issue. Calling them Islamofascist, whatever the word, correct phrase, they're terrorists. I don't care where they're from. I don't care what but they exist. They don't exist in a vacuum. They exist in failed states or nation states supporting them, and that's our point. If you don't get at this, then this scenario that Williams has talked about, we did it without mercy, and how the country reacted. It's a good reaction. This new president and the military, they react violently to Pakistan and chase this nuke down, and that's the whole point. This is a page-turning book to keep your interest, but it's scary, and it was written so.
We do know that the future military is going to have to deal with what you're talking about, these non-state actors working with state actors. But at the same time, we've got these conventional powers like China and Russia asserting a new military posture in their spheres of influence. How do you balance the resource deployment in relation to these significantly different threats?
Well, the current president's trying that. What he's doing is, with a budget that's about 7% higher than the last president, not the biggest budget we've ever seen, but that's equipment. We've got very old jets, C-130s, A-10 Warthog, 1978. C-130 is probably 50 years old. We're still using a 50 cal machine gun. It's a great bullet, a great gun we use in snipers. That's been around for 80 years, the 50 cal M2. So we need to upgrade our gear. If we're really concerned about Russia and China, then we're going to have a draft. Because only 1% of the military is 1% of the country is serving. And that's something that's probably, I'm sure, a non-starter. But I think a government service should be required. But we're not going to get at China and Russia and fight the war on terror with the size of the military we have now, and that's all volunteer force. And politically, it's going to be a very tough thing to.
Oh, absolutely.
But it's not going to just be new jets. It's not just new jets.
We're talking to Colonel David Hunt, co-author of the new book Without Mercy, regarding the contingencies of our military and what they must plan for in the emerging future. During the presidential campaign, I'm sure you recall this, the then candidate to Donald Trump said we had a lackluster crop of generals advising then President Obama, and yet he has taken a lot of generals and put them into the administration. What do you say about the assessment of our military brass and leadership?
Look, Donald Trump is my age, okay? This is first, not political. The man had a chance. He had 4 deferments, I'm sure of. One was for a bone spur. He's got no squat with the veteran community when he says what he said. McCain, he got away with calling McCain what he did because McCain's considered a rhino. I get it. But it was actually uncalled for to talk about that, about the generals. Now, I'm not a great fan of just because of generals. But we've been fighting this war for 16 years. Certainly there are politics involved. But, by the way, he just hired 3 good ones. McMaster's was a great replacement. Flynn was not. Anyways, McMaster's is better at this job. He's brilliant, a very brave man, Civil Star. I know him. I know the Secretary of Defense, Mattis. very dedicated Marine Corps officer. And Flynn, I think, is exceptional, the Homeland Security guy. He's also lost a son in 2010. So the very same generals that were badmouthed by then candidate Trump, he's hiring, and I think it's a good move. And I think that when you run a campaign, a lot of people, both sides of the aisle, say things that they shouldn't, and they wind up eating when they're in office.
Like in many professions today, there are some, Colonel, who say that younger officers may be more up to the new challenges posed by technology. That brings us to cyber attacks and the like. What do you think about this young crop that we have coming in and about the need to really understand technology in the military?
It's a standards issue for me. The junior officers in the military, we because of this continuous war we've had since 9/11, I think we've lowered some standards. I know we've lowered some standards. It's an all-volunteer force, and the attrition turnover rate is pronounced. The cyber business is about will. We have technologies, absolutely spectacular technology. It's every bit as good as what the Chinese and the Russians do. The difference is the Chinese government, the Chinese military, the Russian government, the Russian military are very active, and there are no holds barred. We have held our people back. We have an offensive capability. We can do a lot more defensively to hurt those that have hurt us in the cyber business. We're staggeringly vulnerable to cyber attack in our grid, in our transportation system. Look, the guys they just charged, the Russians that were just charged today, they stole 500,000 names off of Yahoo. We've had the White House broken into, the CIA broken into. I think every arm of the government has been busted into, and should be consequences. The problem is, if you go back, here's the political calculation. You want to go against China, fine, but there are trade partners, and there's been this stop at the water's edge and yell about it, but we've done very little. We are very, very capable of hurting other countries that have done this to us. Very capable. We've got a satellite network that's better than anybody in the world. We've got technology, smarter people, but we're not aggressive in this, and we're certainly not defensive enough. Part of it is that the industry really won't pay to have the type of defenses necessary to stop this. Excuse me. And the U.S. government, in my lifetime, has been at least a decade behind because it's so ponderous on technology. The only one that gets a little bit ahead of it is the CIA and NSA because they can buy off the shelf. But the rest of the government and industry is vulnerable, and it's all about cash and how much money it costs to defend. But we're certainly capable of doing it. We still don't have the will, even as we see what's happening today.
From an offensive standpoint, do you think use of cyber technology is best, as we saw when we work with the Israelis to decouple, if you will, some of the capabilities of the Iranians? Is that the best approach in North Korea, perhaps, to their burgeoning missile program?
Yeah, but you know what? Because somebody talked about it, we're not going to be able to do that. I mean, that was a brilliantly run operation when you read what happened. And now it's all over the place. So in the North Koreans, it's an awful place. Bad guys running that place. Terrible. But they're not stupid. Okay? And the Chinese are not stupid. The Russians aren't stupid. So, yes, it'll be something even more technical and more advanced than that was done. But that's an example of what we can do, but we have not. And if you're gonna, because it's political, we want to pass this by that the Russians interfered with our election. We want to stop at the water's edge and say we didn't change votes. Okay, but we know for sure what they did, and what we've done right now is arrest 4 guys who broke into Yahoo. I'm sorry, that doesn't cut it. We're going after 4 Russians that broke into Yahoo. That's important. That's private citizens, but that ain't getting at what they did. They tried to do with the election, and that shouldn't stand. By the way, the U.S. tries to influence other countries' elections as well. I'm just of the mind, this is the United States of America, and you don't get to do that to us.
In the National Military Strategy paper, it says that when we are confronted with a state actor, the military should be used to, quote, deter, deny, and defeat. And when the main adversary is a non-state actor, the strategy should be to disrupt, degrade, and defeat. Explain each of those to us.
So it's terrible. I mean, the non-state actor is a terrorist. State actor is Russia. And basically it's three levels in which the military could do something. The problem with that is nonsense is it never gets used. I mean, that's a very smart guy who wrote these papers. But for example, let's take Yemen, okay? So what action are we going to take? There's a non-state in Yemen with non-state actors in it. And so far, all we've been able to do is raid. That's all we've been willing to do. SEAL Team 6, Delta Force, Special Forces running in and out of that country and doing raids on compounds. It's not deterring Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, which is AQI, which is in Yemen. So those kind of papers, in my time, 30 years, in my lifetime, have meant, I promise, nothing. I mean, they're think tank things, and they just don't apply. And it certainly doesn't seem going to apply to the new administration. We have since 9/11, hamstrung our military and intelligence services by making decisions mostly in a lot of the White House or at the Secretary of Defense's level. We have lacked flexibility and had things like rules of engagement that have actually killed our soldiers. We've got rules that tell you when you can shoot the enemy. Unheard of. But we've been there. At one time in Iraq, there were 16 rules. They hand them out in cards. The rules of engagement. And they were different for night and day. That you cannot, and we have not, win a war against something like we're fighting with that environment. And so that paper, for me, it's a shredder. It really means nothing.
In an era when 90% of the conflicts are civil wars, if America does engage for one reason or another, what should we expect winning to look like?
Nothing like you're used to. By the way, we're in that in Syria. It's absolutely in the middle of it now. And Iraq is a little different, proxy war, ISIS. It used to be, before Iraq and Afghanistan, 7 to 8 years of a fight if you get into that kind of a war. Now the standard is 16 years, and we're not done. So what you should expect, if you get in the middle of this kind of war, and it turns into an insurgency in which that means you become the enemy. U.S. goes to help country X. Iraq, perfect example. We won that thing in a month and stayed and became the enemy. That's not a political statement. That's just fact. It became an insurgency. That used to means you're in there for 7 or 8 years. And there's no winning. There's no peace treaty. It just abates. They stop. Bad guys stop. You strangle them and they go away. Or they just stop fighting. And now the problem is, so if you do that, like Syria, now that we're in there, I'm telling you that it's probably 10 years that we'll be in there. At Iraq is, 13 now? Afghanistan, 16? We're great at killing and breaking things. The U.S. does not do nation building well. It's not something we like to do. We haven't done it well since World War II. There are countries that do it well. Canadians are great at nation building. Norway has got the interesting way of doing it. Scandinavian countries. They need money and leadership. But the U.S., we break things, and then we need to get other people. We're going to have to back them up with money and resources to actually do the nation building. We need to get out of it. And we refuse, which is one of the reasons we're still there.
This is Colonel David Hunt, co-author of the new book, Without Mercy, and fascinating your perspective on these things. Should the terms of engagement in such cases as these conflicts in Iraq and Syria also take into account the possibility that this will spill over and create instability elsewhere in the region? How do we account for what it is that we create in these circumstances?
You don't even have to be a student of ancient history. We can just look at the war on terror. The unintended consequences of invading Iraq, besides that mistake, and by the way, I was wrong about that, the invasion. I had said so now for 15 years. The intel was wrong. We should not have done it. But now that we did it, the guys fought so well. The unintended consequences of that was creating Iran's power base. Iran is the biggest player in the Middle East. And part of that was because of what we did going into Iraq. So if what we're doing in Syria will have unintended consequences, we just don't know. Turkey's in there with their own militia and their regular army. There's 10 terrorist organizations fighting in there. The Russians are full up, okay? And now the U.S. Army Rangers and the U.S. Marines are in the middle of this, and it's not done yet. So my point to you is a failed state like Syria or Yemen or Libya or whatever country you want to talk to, when we push, we're terrible. We got smart guys, but politically we don't listen to them about what's going to happen once you push. The unintended consequences of combat, certainly a nation going after another nation, are not unfathomable. There's some you can study it from history. What we have not been very good at that, we've got recent examples, Afghanistan and Iraq, in which we paid no attention to. How about unintended consequences in Afghanistan? When we went in 16 years ago, Afghanistan was probably half the drug trade in the U.S. in the world, the heroin.
Mm-hmm.
They went to 90% within 3 years of our occupation. 90%. The biggest user of that product, by the way, is the United States of America. So they were the biggest. Afghanistan, which we occupied, went to 90% of world production, and we, the U.S., was the largest consumer. That's pretty nasty stuff. Again, it's just two examples of unintended consequences when you do what you ask.
You talked about General Mattis, our current defense secretary, and he wants more resources to go into statecraft at the Department of State as the best defense of the nation. How do you look at resource allocation in that sense? You suggested, I think, earlier in the conversation that you would agree with that notion.
I would say my recommendation to my friend Mattis is the first thing he has to do is he's got 1 million people working in the Pentagon, not in the building, but from it, supporting 1 million force soldiers. I would say you get nothing until that gets cleaned up. I'm serious. You cannot have that ratio of bureaucrats supporting that number of soldiers. It's 1 million.
So what happens to the additional $54 billion that the president wants to place at the department?
I'm being a bit sharp, but I'm just telling you. Yes, we've got to build. We've got to get new equipment. We've got to always support the soldiers. But one of the problems with not getting support from the soldiers is the bureaucracy. Again, we talk about it without mercy. It doesn't move. So this tough guy. Mattis is a tough guy. Okay. This tough guy's got to go in, and I mean clean house, and it's not going to be pretty, but that should be the nature of the beast. If you want to get the things we've discussed, this war on terror and these nation-state issues, you got to be lean and mean, and we are not. We're ponderous. It's a huge endeavor. And when Kennedy was president of the United States, this is not about Democrats, Republicans. I'm just giving you a name. During the Cuban Missile Crisis, there were 62 people in the White House staff. Okay, in the Cuban Missile Crisis. Now it exceeds 2,800. You can't. That's unfathomable. That's the White House staff. And yes, the new president wants to cut that back. And okay, good. But he's appointing 4,000 people. That's how many the new president. It's not about Trump. That's what the new president gets to do, of which 1,100 have to be approved by Congress. And so it takes 2 years for a new president, whoever his name, he or she's name is, to actually seat his government. So,
and by the time he does that, he's up for re-election. I want to take.
This? Just don't. I'm going to cut my number in half. I'm only going to appoint 2,000. I don't know. I'm just telling you. Anyways, go ahead.
I want to take you into the future a bit with technology, artificial intelligence. Is a bloodless war, where we send robots in to do our business, is that possible in our lifetimes? And what about the ethical dimensions of that?
The answer is yes. We're very close to the AI technology. We've got bombs that only kill people and don't destroy buildings. Okay, we've got overpressure stuff. We've got, yes, we have, I would say, in one generation, 10 years away from what you're talking about. The ethical dilemma of that, I don't know. The government, our government, has not been good at that. It's too big, and so we're moving very fast on that kind of technology. We're ahead of a lot of people. The Germans have got some good stuff, by the way. Japanese have got some very good stuff. But the ethical dilemma has not been approached. We're moving too fast on getting it bloodless, as you call it. Robots doing the stuff. We've got satellites, close and closer going to be able to shoot stuff. But so at least I'd say 10 years, generation.
Well, I know that in the United Kingdom, they're looking at what they call the sensor-enriched soldier, and they're going to coat soldiers in sensors equipped with smart glasses and smart watch running from a power supply built into their uniform. I mean, these things are right on the horizon, right?
Yeah, we've used them. We've got it now. We've got that suit. It's in the testing phase. Some of it we're using. You see pictures of special operations guys with these 4 lenses on their helmets. It used to be a night vision device. That's 4 levels of seeing. It's actually classified. I'm like all the stuff that they can see. But so it's very relevant. The kind of battle fatigue that soldiers wear has got protection devices in it. Medicine has jumped off the planet in the last 16 years. Guys that normally would have died on the battlefield are surviving because they're getting fixed on the battlefield, right? That's staggering. That's good. It's good stuff. Communications. I mean, we can watch anywhere in the world a raid. Real time. Watch it. And hear it. That's probably not a good thing, but that's not far away.
What about the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, DARPA? How well are they run, and what would fascinate our listeners if they knew that they were working on various types of things? What would fascinate them?
DARPA is a good program. I mean, it's good. It is. We've got stuff. They're developing stuff that can smell for us. It's fascinating. The use of smell technology. They're looking at figuring out how we know what dogs, for example, can do, and try to translate the hearing capability of animals into technology. There's a couple of ideas that they're playing, and they're always working on a deadlier weapon. Deadly weapons, lasers is always being talked about, and yet it's just in the last 4 years developed a good boot. We had some of the worst boots in the world, but we had all this other stuff. DARPA's fascinating. A lot of it's classified. Smaller drones. I mean, they're going to be bug size. They are bug size now, but they're really getting miniature. The technology for drones.
In your book, Without Mercy, you talk a lot about women in command positions. Obviously, that's a change in the military, and you suggest it will be even in the civilian world in terms of a female president. What does all that mean to the military?
It means that the combat experience we've had since 9/11, it will translate, politically. It didn't matter to us that there was a woman president. We gave her exceptional qualities. I mean, a Silver Star winner for Air Force, 3 combat tours, blown up herself. That's real. She's a badass. That's real creds as a sitting president. So what it means is the number of guys that have seen combat will slowly get into the political environment. I think it'll be better. Period. I mean, it'll be a better government when more people who have seen combat serve. And the rest of it, from the military standpoint, is we've got to figure out how to we've got to get more people involved. They're exhausted. We are now talking to soldiers who commonly will tell you they've got 7 to 10 combat tours in their time in the service. That is staggering amount of time to be scared, to be away from families, to be in harm's way continuously. We've got National Guard soldiers in Massachusetts that are Special Forces Reserve. A couple of guys I know just came back from their 9th tour. That's National Guard. That's not active.
Oh, absolutely. And you do think that we need a draft, but you don't think it's politically feasible.
I think we need a service draft, in which one of the things you could do is serve in the military. I'd give you about 10 choices. You come out of high school, there are no exceptions, there are no delays, there's no deferments, and whatever disability you have, we'll find you something to do. Yes. But if you're going to talk about China and Russia, the force you're looking at now is fully deployed in the war on terror. Fully. I mean, so if you throw a China in the mix, we're in trouble. And I don't want a military draft. I want a service draft.
I understand that. And in fact, there's a gentleman in Connecticut, Ted Hollander, who's written a book about this, and you might want to link up with him, Colonel. I want to ask you a final question about whether there should be any amount of planning militarily, and whether there is, I would imagine there really is, toward the expanding extraterrestrial world we're discovering. What do you think about the practicality of trying to plan for an enemy that has been unseen for all these years?
Yeah, we actually have an organization led by a four-star general, which, of course, you have. You can't have a military organization without having a four-star general. I mean, it's absolutely. We've got more generals now in a smaller army than in our history. But we got a thing called Space Command. What your question's not out of. So that is being considered. Okay? The Space Command. It's the generals. There are staff papers written. Nobody's going to get them out on that very question. What happens if? Okay, so if there's a large war.
Are we imagining them to be 100 feet tall, or what kind of imaginings?
You got me on that. I've not read the papers. All I'm telling you is there's a command, unclassified, called Space Command, and their staffs are doing just that. Not in my lifetime, I don't think. But no, and without mercy, we don't have aliens. We got enough trouble.
I understand that. Well, let me ask you, in closing, in terms of what you would suggest is important about the real-world considerations and the plausibility of that scenario that you put into Without Mercy, what is it you want us to take away when we put down a very engaging, entertaining, and frightening book? What is it that you want us to walk away with?
That we're not winning this war, and we have to get the core issue. Killing them is not the answer. And there's 2 points: that and the bureaucracy that is our great country is overburdened. The president pulls this off by cutting out an entire bureaucracy and putting a special team on this problem. The U.S. government couldn't move fast enough. So those are the 2 lessons. We've got to get at nation states, and we've got to get at our own bureaucracy.
I want to thank you so much, Colonel, for joining us today on America Trends. Very enlightening. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Absolutely.